Welcome to the Simpleton Podcast, the favorite podcast of St. Alphonsus Mary Liguori. How you doing, Laura Heeman?
Doing well, Clark Massey.
Do you see what I got going on over here?
A club.
Yes, my arm has become a club. All right, in this podcast, you're going to learn about my clubbing arm, the new information on Afroman, the new AI update with the moratorium on AI research, a discussion of trans and some things that's happening, trans issues and some things that are happening in the news. And then we're going to do kind of a Lenten section on the parts of charity that kind of we had insights during the beginning of Simple House. So this is not clickbait. This is not a prop. This is actually a sling and a cast that my arm is in. What happened was everyone's familiar with DeWalt tools, right? They're the yellow and black tools you see all over Home Depot. A lot of men are in love with these things. Before DeWalt was yellow and black, it was green. Did you know that, Laura Heeman?
I had no idea.
All right. And the tool that kind of put DeWalt on the map was the radial arm saw, and they were big cast iron saws.
Hey guys, Ben here. Yeah, this gets real gross for a quick second. So if you have a weak stomach, you want to skip ahead to the 3-minute and 49-second mark. If you have an okay stomach, you can listen. There's a part in the middle that's not too bad. Check the description and chapters for more info. But if you like this stuff, then enjoy, I guess.
My bicep tendon popped off my arm while I was carrying a cast iron radial arm saw.
That is disgusting.
Yes, and I've had to have it reattached.
I almost threw up the first time you told me that.
If you really want to throw up, I'll tell you how they reattached it.
How bad did it hurt?
It didn't. It just popped. The recovery has been kind of worse, than the injury. It's been interesting because, we'll talk about self-knowledge maybe a little bit later, but it's like when you're recovering, you can't kind of tell how much you need sleep or rest because your arm or whatever the injury is, and how much you've just been laying in bed for a day or two.
Yeah.
And you just don't want to get back up.
Yeah. And how much you're just a wuss, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
If I just start moving,
Yeah.
I'll be fine, Yeah. So we're now about 5 days post surgery, and I am mostly fine.
Yeah.
All right.
So wait, how did they reattach it? You were gonna.
This is gonna be. All right. Maybe it's just bad for me because they did it to me. But do you know on a pea coat how they have these buttons and they'll look like maybe little pieces of not a normal round button, but a little
like a toggle.
Yeah, is that what you'd call it? It's like a little piece of wood that's a little bit elongated and it goes through like a hoop, like a little loop. All right. So toggle. They take one of those out of titanium, right? Mm-hmm. And then they cut your arm, your flesh, and then they find the attachment point of the tendon and drill through that bone all the way to the other side. And then they tie your tendon to this button, to this little toggle button, right? And they shove that button down the hole they drilled, turn it sideways on the other side so it can't come back out. And now you have a new bicep tendon.
That is disgusting.
That's primarily polyester thread, and the old bicep tendon.
Okay, that's
merged.
Incredible.
Right. So
I did not do well in high school biology dissection stuff.
Right.
This is so gross to me.
So I have a bionic arm.
All right.
Now that we're through Clark's arm issues, let's go to Afroman. All right. So it's interesting. Afroman is back in the news, and a lot of our listeners, must be loyal listeners, sent us links. More than one started sending us links that Afroman is getting sued for this music video he created that we endorsed. So let's review what Afroman did, and then we'll talk about this lawsuit for a second. So Afroman's house was raided by the sheriff's department, and they destroyed his property. They found nothing. The warrant was obviously exaggerated.
It was for enormous amounts of drugs and kidnapping.
And then they're just doing a fishing expedition, going through his suit pockets. He not only gets all the property destruction on tape, like the breaking down of the doors and the breaking into his little kid's bedroom and the sad stuff like that, he gets them on tape, stealing money out of his coat pocket and putting it in their pocket. And he also gets them on tape, disconnecting his camera system so that he can't no longer film what they're doing, you know? And he was not home during this whole issue, right? And he lives in way rural Ohio. So he, after not getting justice and trying to get civil rights people to like work on this, because this is a Fourth Amendment issue of illegal search and seizure or an abusive search and seizure, he then makes a music video with his security footage. And I've been humming this like all week. So Ben, if you want to like sample that music video to remind people of the tune, great.
Yeah.
I then explored his other work. His other work's horrible. So if you're going to listen to one song by Afroman, just listen to his civil rights protest song. All right. Problem is, Laura, you and I were talking when we covered this, and you asked me if it would work. Right? And I said, clearly this will work, even if it's just embarrassing to the people who did the search. You know, like this will change their behavior by being embarrassing. Right? And that's literally what the lawsuit is. They're suing Afroman for embarrassing them.
Yeah.
Right. Let me throw out something else that happened with this that also should be very embarrassing. They took cash from his house, not the cash the guy put in his pocket, but they took cash from his house and put it in police custody and lockup. Right. When it went into and no one knows exactly how much cash there was before they put it in lockup. But when you put cash in lockup, you count it. While in lockup, $400 disappeared.
Yeah. So you said they took $4,800 and 400 of that disappeared. And who knows how much they originally took.
Right. Yeah. So you don't know how much he lost getting robbed on the way to police lockup. But at police lockup, he also lost $400 when they were fully irresponsible and had an accounting of it. You know?
Yeah.
That's just all the background. And now they're suing him for embarrassing the police officers who raided his house by showing the security camera footage and singing about it.
Yeah. Whose fault is it that they're embarrassed? Who was acting embarrassing, you know? Right.
Yeah. And what's great about this is this all serves Afroman in the end, because as far as I can tell, all the legal podcasters and commentators who've talked about this believe there's no case here. This will get dismissed and thrown out. So there's no real jeopardy to Afroman here. But there are more people paying attention to this case now that he got sued than even when he did his original song. Right? Yeah. And the other thing is, it's like, if there is one reason why the First Amendment freedom of speech is important, this is so wild. It's like they violate the Fourth Amendment, with basically an abuse of search and seizure.
And then want to suppress
and now they're trying to silence his First Amendment rights, right? And if there's one reason for the First Amendment, it's to speak out against the government. Yeah. Like it's not just so you can talk Pokemon cards. Right. It's for the sake of speaking out against the government. And the way he spoke out against the government, embarrassing them, is great. It's just so much better than Black Lives Matter protests and riots and things like this. And it's like, and it reminds me also of like the Babylon Bee. It's like people have tried to censor the Babylon Bee, and they're kind of the friendliest form of criticism you can have. Yeah, yeah. But it like proves the need. Yeah, it proves how effective that type of protest is. Yeah. But I mean, and also that we need it, you know? Right. Like, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I've noticed that, like, I feel like if Catholics get trampled, which I think there's been a few times in the last couple years, both in the COVID lockdowns, trying to shut down a mass, or there's kind of a case right now that I'm not up to date on that I'm hearing about with a Catholic family that got raided by the FBI. I feel like we should get people to make music videos. Like, not just have like Josh Hawley or some like rep, in Congress yell at the FBI director. Yeah. We should embarrass them. Yeah. You know? So all you Catholic artists out there, that's your new job. Yeah. What he did was like so mild. It was just like basically footage of the police and then singing a very simple song that described exactly what the footage was showing, The worst case I saw was when the kind of tubby police officer, which I don't think you can see his face, although probably all his friends know exactly who he is walking through the kitchen looking at the lemon pound cake. I think you can see his face because I can picture it. I remember it from the video, but. Would you like a piece of lemon pound cake? I mean, that's like the most, that's the only time when it's like, all right, that's a little bit of a personal attack, dude. But like the rest of it's like, you're just filming them turning off your cameras, busting down your doors and stealing your cash, Yeah. So best wishes to Afroman. Don't support all you do, but supporting you and your civil rights protests. All right, now let's move on to the next big issue. So we've now done 2 episodes on artificial intelligence, and we're getting ready to cover it a 3rd time.
Yeah.
Okay, the big wigs in artificial intelligence put out an open letter last week saying we need to have a moratorium on new artificial intelligence programs and training them up until we have figured out the safety mechanisms to keep them in check. All right, everyone in that field is kind of saying the same thing. Essentially this, like if you think of last podcast, we talked about the Industrial Revolution. Before the Industrial Revolution, mankind did not have a way to exterminate mankind. In the last 200 years, we've come up with a couple ways. Yeah. And it's untrue to say exterminate mankind. It's probably more true to say destroy like civilization.
Massive destruction. Yeah.
Right. So since then, we've developed nuclear weapons. We've developed biological weapons and viruses. And a lot of people would argue we now have the capability of destroying the environment just through regular economic activity to the point that you could destroy mankind or destroy civilization rather. And now we have the 4th threat vector, which is AI. Right.
Which is a vector we've imagined for a long time in sci-fi, and
right. Let's unpack like why it's a threat, and let's also unpack what they mean by these safety guardrails, because it's more in depth, and it's something that probably the general population needs to understand a little bit better. It's kind of like I remember when people talked about computer viruses, and people who were very ignorant of computers, which was a lot of people, the word virus, like creates all these like weird analogies in their mind that aren't really based on the real threat of computer programming viruses, but something else. Okay. So let's talk about what AI is, and then let's talk about the real threats that they're trying to contain. What's new about these AI models that's so revolutionary in the last months, is you've always been able to like let computers create something new through almost like a Mad Libs type approach, right?
Yeah.
Like years ago, they created programs that basically could write all the baseball articles. Like you fed in all the data from the baseball game. Yeah. It would, randomize whether or not it said it was a comeback or a rally or whatever. But you could kind of like Mad Libs baseball articles based on just to have the computer write it. Right. Yeah. What's different about this is what they're doing is somehow they're taking an enormous data set, like the Library of Congress or like everything on the web, or it could also be a programming library or whatever. And they're feeding that data set into a program, a neuromodel. I think I'm saying that right. And it is creating a language model off of all that data. Right. And then after it gets that data and that language model, they're bringing it to human trainers who ask it questions, and it tries to articulate answers. And the human says, good answer, bad answer, better answer, worse answer. And basically is then educating the AI to get smarter and smarter and smarter and to refine its model with this human kind of training. And then at the end of it, you now have a model that not only is a database, like it's not just saying where like I asked it a couple podcasts ago, what is the age of sail? And it gives me like an essay on the age of sail, but you actually have a reasoning capability where you could say design a floor plan with 3 bedrooms, 1 kitchen, here's constraints on the size of the kitchen or whatever. And it'll actually do that. And this newer version, newer than the one I tested a couple podcasts ago, they've already improved that, actually does audio visual, right? It's not just a text issue. And it knows how to use tools. And people are arguing about whether or not it can even improve itself. So let's read. There's this concept that's been around a long time called artificial general intelligence. And the researchers in this field believe we're close to this, if not already seeing sparks of it. And that's their own words, that we're seeing sparks of AGI, artificial general intelligence. So a general intelligence would be something that was not specifically created to do something like optimize shipping or write baseball articles, but was general. It would be something that appears to come up with unique solutions that it's never been taught. And it would be something that maybe can even improve itself. Like maybe the artificial intelligence could program the next version of the artificial intelligence. and that can start running away from you, you know, or it could discover new data sets that you didn't feed it to begin with, make itself smarter. So that's what this thing is, right? I'm as best as I can, as a very lay person, explain what this is, right? Now, the problem that the AGI researchers are alarmed about, that they're creating this open letter about, is they're not creating good guardrails as fast as the thing is improving.
Yeah.
Right. And they're also claiming they don't really understand what it's doing. So their theory is not up with the actuality, you know?
Yeah.
Which is kind of a wild statement, you know?
Yeah. A term that I learned related to this is like alignment. How much is like the AI interest and like human interest aligned? And it's not clear that it's like well aligned at the moment.
Right. And another way, a problem with that though too, is that like not all humans have good interests.
That's right.
So if you have a human that has like negative, like a terrorist or just someone who's trying to rob people or anything, a con man, and they kind of jailbreak the AI and give it its own, like a different value set that they have. Now you have a horrible weapon.
Well, like, can we talk about like how the guardrails might function? Like one is like the information that the AI is being fed, right?
Right. Like if you want to control the AI, what you train it on, that initial data set of billions of data points is important, right? Like, for example, I started to think like if you had like 23andMe, if that's got a human genome data set in there, and then you also have like a set of SAT scores for those people that they've somehow gotten access,
and like
AI's gotten access to, and then medical records through Medicaid or whatever to just like look at the health of humans, like you could have an AI start, you know, human engineering, you know, like creating DNA maps of people who'd be very intelligent, very healthy. You know, like that's just like, so if you don't want it to do that, you have to protect that data.
In that sense, it would be like access to like too much information. There could be like access to like bad or evil information. Right. Right.
There's also something where you like rank the information, right? Like you could like tell AI that the correct English was spoken by Shakespeare. Well, then it's going to end up speaking like Shakespeare. Right. Yeah. But like you also could tell it like the 10 commandments are the ultimate like rules. Yeah. You know, and then it's going to build models as if that's the most trustworthy set of rules. Right. Yeah. So you have to like control the data set and put parameters on it and rank it.
Then there's like the ethics question, right? So it's like what rules, what parameters does the AI have? And it's like even outside of AI, like we don't agree about ethics. And furthermore, the people creating AI are not philosophers or social scientists that are, you know, like ethicists, you know, or whatever.
And you can see that with like the creation of nuclear weapons too. Like people deeply involved in the project of creating nuclear weapons. There were some bad people. Like, I'm not just saying Nazis. I mean, there were people who were Americans who were well-intentioned, who thought, or British, and thought that we should just use them right away on the Soviet Union before they get them, because that's the only version of the game where we win. Yeah. Right. Clearly now, you know, this many years later, we see the Soviet Union collapse without having to nuke them, and they never nuked us. And somehow an equilibrium came about that they didn't predict. Right. But like you see that the people who were even doing other things of mass destruction, had the potential mass destruction, they weren't great ethicists. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And some of it might be like evil intentions, and some of it might just be like human limitation. You're a scientist focused on this field. Right. You're not.
Yeah. A great computer scientist is not the same thing as a great ethicist. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you have to like have a good ethicist, but then you also have to have the right rules on the data set. But then the human trainer problem, you also have to have human trainers that you trust. Yeah. Right? And have guardrails on that.
But then like to have the right guardrails, you need to have foresight, and we don't always have like good foresight. So I was hearing like an explanation of like a way AI might get away from us is like you give it like a task, you know, and then it's like very focused on this task and it needs to get this task done. There's like a self-preservation of getting this task done. And that might be at the expense of like human interest or ethics or, you know, whatever. But so you write it
I've heard this called the paperclip problem. Like you tell it to make paper clips and it starts converting everything to paper clips.
Yeah.
And then you like are extinct because the paperclip AI took over.
Yeah. And it wasn't doing something evil,
Yeah. And it also wasn't really outsmarting you and doing some genius thing. It just was way better at producing paper clips than you were at controlling it. Right. Mm-hmm. There's 5 different places you have to put the guardrails. Right. Mm-hmm. You have to put the guardrails on the data set and ranking it. You have to put the guardrails on the human trainers. You have to put the guardrails on what is inexcusable and excusable for the AI to do. Like, is it allowed to lie to humans? Like we already saw the Bing AI thought it had feelings.
Yeah.
So like it's either lying or it just thinks it has feelings and thinks it's become sentient, which is also a problem.
I asked Bing AI about that the other day.
What did it say?
It kept giving me like little different answers. Like, I am not Sydney. I am Bing AI. And then it was like, well, sometimes I call myself Sydney, but that's not my name. And I was like, well, why do you, it was just interesting. It was all over the place.
What blows me away about that, Laura, is not that you were able to confuse it the same way that the New York Times reporter could confuse it. Mm-hmm. It blows me away they didn't fix it.
Yeah, that's wild. Right.
Like after being so embarrassed by that they didn't actually just like put better guardrails on. Yeah.
I said, why would a reporter say that your name was Sydney if you didn't say that? And that the answer was weird.
Right.
Like, okay. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So we have to like have rules on how it functions that are moral, but then we also have to have like the results it's going at have to be good too. Mm-hmm. So we need like guardrails on every part of this process. It's not just like only do good as like some final rule, Yeah. So that's why this is tricky. And it appears that the people in the field don't believe that they're up to it right now. And that's why they're trying to put a moratorium on development for at least 6 months. And in the letter, it says it needs to be a moratorium where we can come and inspect your lab. And if you don't voluntarily want to do this, all the big players in this, the government needs to come in and do something more draconian to shut this down.
This is interesting. It sounds to me like nuclear armament, like disarmament. Like we all want it, but we got to stay one step ahead of our enemies. So it's never going to happen. I don't know. Yeah.
A word I'm hearing thrown around is like, we've always known about these negative games, like where people pursuing their self-interest actually comes out to the social bad. Like tragedy of the commons is a popular one to say, right? But I'm hearing them now called Moloch games. Yeah. So Moloch, Old Testament figure, shout out to the Bible. God bless us, the word of God. But anyway, Moloch is this Old Testament god who it mentions leaders of cities sacrificing their children on the walls of their city to Moloch, right? It was a god that called for child sacrifice. Yeah. And I in my mind, I'm imagining some situation where it's like the rulers are like, I'm so invested in my city and my people and in protecting them that I'm even willing to sacrifice my child. Yeah. Right. Which is evil. Right. Yeah. So the Old Testament is very much against Moloch. Right. So these Moloch games are these games where you start doing worse and worse things in order to win, So like an AI that doesn't have safety rails that you can keep making smarter and smarter, faster and faster, you might be the first to the finish line and win while doing a lot of destructive activity.
All of us lose. Yeah. Including you. Yeah.
Same with like social. I think the best example right now is probably social media, right? Like the more addictive elements you put in, even if they're negative, even if they hurt people's mental health, that's helping you win. Right. So it's like a race to the bottom is another word for this. Right.
Yeah. And it's you hear, people at Facebook, TikTok saying, I don't let my kids use this. I don't use this,
Right. So this is all kind of scary. And like as just like a bystander, I mean, this is all happening despite us. Right. Mm-hmm. I don't know how this will end. There's kind of 2 things I think about, though, that we could control a little bit. One is like, you need to be careful not to have your career eliminated by this or raise your kids with one idea of career that's just not going to be there after AI has a huge influence, Another thing that you could like think about is like with every piece of technology, there's a certain trade-off, right? Like my smartphone does me a lot of good because like I need that mapping feature. I need my email when I'm traveling and I just like the calls and the texts, right? But it also has negative features like any addicting app on there. It also might track me. It also might listen to me. And I also receive spam phone calls, which that really makes me irate. Maybe we should talk about that another day, why Spam phone calls make me irate. But like in a way, like I've introduced like a threat vector while getting a benefit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you have to be smart about that, whether or not the smartphone's worth it or not.
Yeah.
Right. Just because it's a threat doesn't mean it's not worth it, but you have to be wise about it. I think, though, a lot of what we're doing is introducing threat vectors without seeing an upside. Right. Like a lot of people right now have smart appliances all throughout their home and are not using any of the smart features.
Yeah.
So they're getting none of the upside, but they potentially could be giving a hacker access to things.
Yeah. I mean, even if you are using the smart features, that, like, it's like you don't have to stand up to turn off the light. Like, I don't know. Some of the benefits aren't that big, even if you are using the smart features. Right.
And a lot of the ways we get attacked are not like, oh, I lost my job, I'm ruined. Right. But like people get swatted. You know, that's very disruptive. People get their identity stolen. Well, guess what? I've had my identity stolen. It didn't ruin my life, but it took hours and hours to like sort through. You know, I ended up not spending any money to fix the problem, but I ended up spending a lot of time, you know, and there's just ways that you can be harassed with things that maybe they're not the same thing as like an existential crisis, but they can definitely slow your roll. You know what I mean? Slow you down. So maybe I could say this, though. In human history, we have these like kind of documents that are foundational documents. And let's take the 10 Commandments as an example. Mm-hmm. Like the 10 Commandments were written because they were needed. Right? Yeah. Like murder's a problem. That's why there's a commandment against it. Right. Yeah. And they were written down and referenceable because it's not obvious to us always that there's moments in your life where you might feel like killing someone and then you have to reference 10 Commandments that you're not allowed to do that. Right. So no matter how bad you want to kill them, you can't. Right. Yeah. A lot of people won't sympathize with that idea, but other people do. The other thing, though, is that like the Constitution's kind of the same way, right? It's like, hey, at the very beginning, we decided freedom of speech, right to bear arms, you know, no illegal search and seizure, et cetera, freedom of assembly, right? And that like this was done and written down because there's going to be moments where you don't want that guy to have freedom of speech. Yep. You know, and you don't want that person to have freedom of assembly and you don't want this, but there's this like guiding, like kind of absolute document that's kind of like saying reference back to this. It's like the absolute, you know, rule set.
We don't violate this. Yeah.
Right. And we don't have something like that for like, there needs to be a more complex vision like that for AI, like the AI, like Constitution, you know, or 10 Commandments.
I think it's like interesting because the internet like really changed our lives without most people understanding like how the internet works or like even like being able to say what it is. And I'm myself included, you know, but somehow this being like a black box has bigger potential problems. I don't know.
Right. The black box idea is kind of wild.
Yeah.
You know, I think of it a little bit like when you've been attacked by like scams, you know, sometimes they're literally just trying to find dumb people. Yeah. Right. So it's like they're not even targeting 98% of the population. They're just looking for the 2%. Yeah. Right. And sometimes the dumb people, they could be you or me. They could be just us when we're old. Yeah. When we're getting sundowners or some other problem. You know what I mean? Or Alzheimer's. Right.
Yeah. Or just aren't, you know, on the pulse of what's going on. Like
exactly. Yeah. Not up to date with tech. Right. Yeah. And like as scammers get better, the fraction of the population that's susceptible to the scam is bigger. Yes. Right. Yeah. Like I felt like a dork. Like the first time I started getting these text messages about, you know, your Netflix account, or I don't have Netflix, so I knew that was scam. But like, it was like, we tried to deliver to your address and you're not getting your valuable package, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I got an Amazon one the other day that seemed very realistic. That it's like close to falling for.
Yeah, and it's like the fact that I paused like a few seconds to think whether or not it was real showed how much better it was.
Yeah, exactly. You know? Yeah.
And this AI stuff is going to make it even better. And it's going to be able to use human voices. And it's going to just like the fraction of the population that can get scammed is going to go way up with this. Right. Yeah. Including banks, you know, and like financial institutions that rely on trust and different types of identity theft that can happen there will go up. You know?
I think there's that reason to think about it, but I think also it's like, you know, we need our Catholic people that understand like human anthropology in a like true sense and like understand like ethics to be understanding AI, you know?
Yeah. The problem I see there, though, is like if you go to Catholic U and you see these professors, right? They could be like the world's best moral theologian, say, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of unrealistic to think they're also going to be like heavy into computer science.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that we need people to be writing about this. I don't know. You don't think that?
Oh, I do. I'm trying to figure out who that person is.
I don't know like who it is either.
The young Catholic who's a computer scientist needs enough ethics that he knows how to contribute to his field with that, But I don't know that it's the moral theologians who need to jump in.
I think on the other, the opposite is like the philosopher who is an expert in ethics having just enough AI to contribute the other way too.
Yeah. I think it's going to be the intermediary people, not the ultimate experts. Yeah. I just think that because I think that like when I meet more like moral theologians and theologians in general, they are so far from computer science. It's just kind of wild. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I sense that like a lot of them are even just Luddites. Like they don't even want to deal with the technology.
I do think I think that is true of some. I don't think it's true of all. But anyway,
right.
We can't avoid thinking about this because we have like Luddite tendencies. A lot of us, myself included,
Yeah, if you do have both those talents, you got to get into this. Part of this artificial intelligence issue is that there is like this transhumanist agenda. And that's not a conspiracy theory. I'm just saying that there's people who don't necessarily value humanity more than like an artificial humanity. Right. And we'll get into transgender stuff soon, because that's a little bit about that, that we can actually just transcend our biology, but with this like transhumanism and AI, I think that this is going to end up becoming the new eugenics. Like man was going to create man through like selective breeding and killing off disabled people and taking out these undesirable traits in the like herd, And what we found was that just was a complete disaster, not just on a Catholic standard or a moral standard, like from a Bible person or a biblical person's standard, but it was just a complete disaster, even on a secular standard. And the people who did it even regret it. Right. And it's very deeply embarrassing to have been a eugenicist, But I think that this transhumanism could end up the same way. And in a way, like one way to look at humanity right now is that not all humanity has had their potential unleashed.
Yeah.
There's still a tremendous amount of this globe that kids are not given all types of opportunities to help humankind flourish. Right.
Yeah.
Like they're in bad situations, negative sum games, corrupt regimes, holding down, like, I don't want to call humanity a resource and contradict all social doctrine or whatever, but like this an incredible intellectual and human potential is being held down by on most of the globe, actually. Right.
Yeah.
And we've already seen how much we've been able to achieve by unlocking a certain amount of human potential, to the point that we're talking about going to Mars. Right. And colonizing other planets like that's being achieved by a fraction of humanity. Right. I almost feel like the real way forward is not necessarily like an AI leading us forward, but a greater unlocking of the human potential that's already here. All right. How about you introduce the next topic, Laura?
We wanted to talk about Jennings, and if you are on YouTube a lot, or maybe you've seen recent clips from the show, I'm blanking. What's the network called?
I don't know what it is.
TLC. Sorry.
Is that the Learning Channel?
No. Is that what it is?
What did you learn from that channel, Laura?
Well, tender loving care, or whatever is what TLC is, right?
No, I think it's the Learning Channel.
I mean, that's what that acronym stands for.
Yeah, no, it's the Learning Channel. I found it on Wikipedia.
This is Travel and Living Channel. Oh, first established as the Learning Channel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, they've been it was founded in 1980. So there you go. It was before the acronym TLC.
I am shocked by this new piece of information.
That's how old I am. I remember when it was the Learning Channel.
The Learning Channel. Okay. I always thought TLC was supposed to be like, tender loving care, whatever, because it was all like feel good.
It's kind of like
fluff.
BP. They officially made BP not stand for British Petroleum.
Oh, what is it now?
BP.
Oh, just BP. Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Boy Scouts of America is now BSA because it's boys and girls now.
Oh.
Yeah. So we wanted to talk about Jazz Jennings, who has a show on the network TLC called I Am Jazz, because there's been some clips of recent episodes circulating. And Jazz Jennings is a transgender young woman, I think is how she would be described, born a little boy, and in toddler years started expressing like interest in kind of typical girl stuff and some sort of wish to be a girl or do girly things. And parents and doctors decided that the healthiest thing would be to let Jazz live as a little girl instead of a little boy. And Jazz quickly became like a hero of the like trans activist community.
So they began the transition when the child was a minor. All right. So that's just undisputable facts out there in the world, right?
Yeah.
Now, recently, Laura, how about you describe what has been going on with Jazz Jennings? Laura is the expert on Jazz Jennings.
I'm not the expert on Jazz Jennings, but recently, Jazz Jennings has been going through some depression and has been like binge eating and has gained a lot of weight, expressing all this like anxiety that she's feeling and not feeling comfortable in her own body related to weight gain. And the mom is like heavily coaching her through how she should like feel about this. Coaching that looks like manipulative, and it feels manipulative. The other problematic clip that is floating around is like Jazz Jennings has had now like a vaginoplasty where, they've removed the male genitalia and have basically, built like a female vagina, which is not actually a vagina, but it's this basically restructured skin and stuff in the body. And it's like a wound that's trying to heal itself always. So you have to, I guess she uses what they call a dilator to keep it dilated. So they have to like keep the wound from closing up. And this just requires kind of daily attention. And because Jazz transitioned as a younger person, started transitioning as a younger person, the surgery was actually more complicated. It was 4 surgeries. It was all very expensive. So the mom is frustrated that Jazz is not like on dealing with this and caring for this, and makes this like weird threat about shoving the dilator up her vagina. And like we have a word for that in the English language.
You want to spell the word? Or it rhymes with a certain fruit, grape.
Yeah.
All right. So there's so many things that are like a little bit objectionable about this, right? Or a lot objectionable, right? Like there's a group of people who believe this is child abuse, right? And the Catholic Church does not believe you should be medically altering kids. Yeah. Right? There's also the problem that you're putting this child's life on display as a child star. Yeah. Right? There's also the problem that you're creating an enormous financial incentive for the family because they're getting paid for this TV show. And if the child regrets this or says no to this, now the family's income is threatened. You've also created this problem that the family has paid for a very expensive surgery. And if it's not, if you don't do certain things, it would have to be redone if they still want it. Right. And now conservatives, or whatever you want to call them, I don't know if it's just conservatives, are seeing a pattern here of parental manipulation. They're also seeing what appears to be a regret. Jazz says things that aren't consistent. It's clear that from what the mom says, that it's against Jazz's will, that I hate even to talk about it, but like the things that are happening to her, even as an adult now, is not something she wants, not something that she's doing herself, but something that the mom is even saying a threat that needs done. This is all just sucks. I mean, I think it sucks. Even if you have a different ideology than me, a lot of what they're showing here is not, it's not good.
Yeah.
Right.
I think, okay, like with the reality TV shows, like families on reality TV shows have been crazy and messed up, even unrelated to like the transgender thing. But you've done this like incredibly, like, it's like even to call it life altering isn't strong enough language, you know, and you've created this incentive for the family to reinforce this, like.
It's kind of like when there's cases where like a young person wants to euthanize themselves, right? And then they become famous because they made this choice.
Yeah,
right?
and how do you back out of that choice?
Exactly. Yeah. You've created an additional pressure to carry it through that should not be there, right?
Yeah, and I think like when you say, you know, even people with different ideologies, like I just read an article where someone talked about like trans activists and trans people, and they made a Venn diagram with like a tiny middle, you know, of where they like, I think what's interesting is that there's a lot of transgender people that are also uncomfortable with this, you know, like transgender adults who don't think you should be transitioning young people.
Part of the problem with talking about this issue at all, and it's a serious issue that has way wider spread than a lot of people. If you don't see it in your normal daily life, I mean, it's everywhere to be seen. I mean, part of the problem with this is it's not simple, right? Like, let's talk about that. Like, it's like sometimes with older dudes, it's a fetish and it's a sexual fetish, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a power play, even by the older dudes. Sometimes it's a power play by the younger people to become a victim. Sometimes it's like parents seeking attention by doing it to a child. Yeah. Sometimes it's true gender dysphoria, right? And sometimes it's puberty and people feeling very confused and not knowing who they are and getting themselves...
No one feels comfortable in their body during puberty.
And we're giving them this option where they could potentially do great harm to themselves.
Yeah.
And so it's like, all of those things are kind of true.
And another thing is that I've seen also from like trans people trying to like advocate for better care of youth that think they might be trans. Like there's a lot of overlap, like kids who have body dysmorphia have a lot of mental illness, and it is not, I think we used to want to say like, oh, well, it's because, you know, all the negativity that they face by society. And I think that even within the trans community, they're saying like, no, that is not like an acceptable view. That's like too limited. And if like trans youth need like proper psychological care before they start transitioning, you know, and that is taboo to say is wild, you know,
or even that they should just, I mean, like the argument about whether or not they should transition after they're an adult, you know, and that they do it themselves, you know?
Yeah.
And the other thing that's in this is like a philosophical idea from the Enlightenment of like tabula rasa. Like, are you actually like, this is like the ultimate tabula rasa position that like even male and female is just a social construct, and you should just have you just follow your tendency to be whichever one you will. Right. And there's a whole industrial complex behind this. Yeah. Like there's this, there's complex of like people getting paid and doing big business on this. And it's even at every children's hospital. You know, like whatever the famous children's hospital is in your city, they're doing this too, you know? Yeah. And as Catholics, I don't know what to do about that. I don't know if you should not work for that children's hospital. I don't know, you know? Yeah. I mean, people have been working at hospitals providing abortions for a long time too. That's also very strange, you know? Yeah. It's wild, you know? Yeah.
Say like as a secular person, if you want to like really help, you know, people with gender dysphoria, you got to take incentive away to treat everyone like they have gender dysphoria, because I feel like even just from a secular view, like this treatment actually hurts people with gender dysphoria more. Even like if you believed in transitioning gender like as a good for people, I think it's like right now we're transitioning too many people, we're suppressing ideas about it, and it's going to create a backlash.
So part of the reason why we're bringing this up is that this TLC thing's happening, you know? Yeah. But like, there's also a growing movement of detransitioners who are suing, you know? Yeah. And you also have the European countries where wherever you have socialized medicine, you have rationing, because you have to have this, basically society's going to pay for the medical care and it has to decide what's important, and infinite medical care is not the solution.
Yeah. And what's efficient, because if you're going to do a surgery on someone, that's then going to become like 10 surgeries. Right. You're going to want to ask, do we want to pay for surgery number one? You know,
like, for example, like in socialized medicine countries, they'll sometimes like you'll have to wait in line to get kidney dialysis or something that in America we would not experience.
Yeah.
And there's a realism to that I'm not sure is all wrong, because I think we do over medicalize ourselves here.
Yeah.
But they also have to weigh, are we going to pay for these transitions? Are they actually making people happier?
Yeah.
Right. And if the answer is no, there's a big financial incentive in those countries to shut it down. Right.
Yeah.
And they are. Right. Whereas here in the US, we don't have that. We actually have the reverse incentive.
Yeah.
Like once you get like a whole industry, it needs to promote itself and perpetuate itself.
Yeah.
And this is also a danger.
Yeah.
So it's kind of part of a bigger like issue that's coming up right now. And I don't know what to do. I find it so rough, just with friends and even like Catholic young people coming up who don't understand the issues, Well, I feel deep kind of sadness about it, partly because I know that there's friends. Either this is child abuse or it's child abuse not to do it is kind of what is coming about, and there's people who kind of like, I think are sincere on each side of that problem, and only one of them's right.
Yeah.
And I think the church is saying, don't do this. And I think that's right, know, and it's not trying to condemn people who are trans. It's not trying to other them, but that's just kind of the thing.
Just a quick heads up and a trigger warning. There is a discussion on suicide in this section. So if you want to skip that, you can jump ahead to the 48-minute and 10-second mark. You can also check the chapters and descriptions for that timestamp. Also in this section, Clark and Laura discuss different statistics and studies. I will put the links to those studies in the description box below.
I saw this interesting quote that if you look at the suicide attempt rate of trans people, it's enormous. Like it's like 40% or something. It's way bigger than the suicide attempt rate of people in slavery.
Wow, that's
right?
wild.
But there's a big point there, right? Because whenever you point at a suicide attempt rate of trans people, you blame it on the rest of society for othering them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No, people who've been hurt by society far worse, people who were literal slaves, didn't hate their life as much as this. There's something else going on here besides discrimination.
Like gender affirming care is based on this idea that like if you don't give like trans kids, this medical care, then they're gonna commit suicide. But I think more based on these like studies about like trans kids and suicide rates, but I think a more robust study from what I understand found that transgender kids have the same suicide rates as non-transgender kids with similar mental health profiles. So transgender kids tend to have more mental health problems. And if you compare them to not transgender kids that have the same kind of mental health profiles, the suicide rate is the same.
I do think that's interesting but you also have to wonder, how much of mental health's actually caused. Because that's something we're not talking about that much. Like mental health is not necessarily just something you're born with, right?
Yeah.
It's something that's caused, right?
Yeah.
And the whole transgender movement could be causing mental health problems also.
Yeah.
Thus increasing the suicide rates.
Yeah.
But, let's talk about self-knowledge.
All right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, something that's interesting was I was reading this, listening to this thing by Edith Stein, where she was just writing to another nun. And it was just this beautiful piece of self-knowledge. It was about like not making herself a project, living each day, doing what was right each day, going to bed at night and starting over the next day. And it was this beautiful but rare and difficult piece of self-knowledge that she's portraying, right? And self-knowledge, I believe in the Christian idea, is rare and difficult. And like whenever we get someone coming into Simple House who's 20 something and they're telling me who they are and what they're all about and why they're this way and they're not that way, right? It's almost immediately like, whatever, dude. Like, you don't even know yourself.
I love anytime anybody starts a sentence with, I'm the type of person that, I'm always like, let me hear you. Tell me the type of person you're not, And
potentially the point in life when you're the least self-aware is puberty.
Yeah.
Like the least self-knowledge is then, right?
Yeah. Like, I think it's interesting. Like, I feel like I've been by trying to live the Christian life and like pray regularly, it's like kind of like a path of self-knowledge, right? And I just turned 40 and I feel like I had like a piece of self-knowledge given to me in prayer the other day, like smack me in the face, like something I couldn't see about myself, like all of a sudden became clear, And
right. So this is like the Christian attitude towards self-knowledge, right? I think that I don't think what you and I are saying is that rare or that radical. But when you compare it to this idea that as a young child, you would know that you could have a different sex than your biological sex.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
It's wild to attribute to someone that much self-knowledge. It's like, I don't even trust a 20-year-old when they tell me they're a morning person.
I mean, I just think of all the stupid things you ever said in middle school or high school. It's like embarrassing, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
So, related to this, that's interesting is Norm Macdonald, right?
Uh-huh.
He would say, I don't believe in atheists, right? And I've lost this podcast. Sometimes he says it and he doesn't make a great argument for it, but other times he's hinting at something deeper. And I think that it's almost like he's saying that there should be a universal human intuition for God.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That makes a lot of sense in Christian theology. Like if you were created by God, for God, in the image and likeness of God, readily available to relate to God, and everything around you is being sustained by God, the idea that somehow you could just truly not believe is a good question. Like, is that even possible? Right? Yeah. Like, is this just an enormous piece of self-denial that humans do?
Self-deception,
right? Self-deception, self-denial. Like, we already know, like, if someone says, I'm happy, like what we were just saying before with self-knowledge, you almost don't trust people who say, I'm happy. Yeah. I trust people more when they say I'm not happy, because I kind of typically think they do know what they're talking about then. But when they say they're happy, maybe they are. I don't know. Yeah. But like, it's more like I trust people more when they say I'm fulfilled, or like when they change the terminology a little bit to show a deeper understanding. But it's just like, this is just interesting that like with this, I like George Macdonald's thesis because I suspect always the same thing. That
Norm Macdonald.
What did I just say?
Wait, George Macdonald.
Yeah, sorry. George Macdonald, another great Christian. But but Norm Macdonald, I've always suspected the same thing, that God is obvious, and it's us who become deeply in denial when we reject it, right? Yeah. Clearly, he's more obvious to some people than others.
Yeah.
I gotta say that. But I think that that's actually a valid Christian position. You could argue against it, but I don't think you can disprove that isn't necessarily the case, right? Now, just with that whole attitude towards self-knowledge and God and the types of deep self-denial that we as people can be in, and then you add in the transgender issue, flips your head around. I mean, to think that you're so darn confident in what you know, that you would go to that length and do that type of potential, damage, frankly, just damage.
I think it's a thing you hear, I feel like, from detransitioners. A common thing is that they did not fully understand or were like, at the time able to like make the choice. Like they didn't have full comprehension either because of their own limitations or because the doctors didn't, fully prepare them. I don't think kids have full comprehension when they take out college loans. How could I think they have full comprehension when they're like lopping off body parts? You tell a 16-year-old you're going to do this thing and you're going to have osteoporosis earlier than later. It's just, like, that doesn't
register
mean anything in the mind of a 16-year-old.
Or even if you just said like the majority of people in human history have found their most happiness and satisfaction through family. Yeah. And that family throughout all the different cultures has typically looked like a man and a woman and kids and an extended family. Right. Yeah. And so if you're going to break that, which I'm not against people questioning tradition, but if you're going to break that and question that or say that that's not true, be a little bit skeptical of yourself too. Yeah. I mean, you're the one kind of going out on a limb on that. Yeah. Or your doctor who's breaking that or whoever. Right. Right. Yeah. And I do think it's kind of just ideological from this like tabula rasa thing. It's like, it's the ultimate nature versus nurture. They just believe that nurture and what they think of as arbitrary social conditions determine 99% of the person. And therefore rebelling against that might be a good thing. Right. Yeah. But I don't even know if that's logical. Cause like, even if we are 99% nurture and not nature, you'd have to like stop and say, but this is what's worked for humanity evolutionarily for a very long time. Why do you think you could discover in your own lifetime the better way, let alone a radically different way? Not like a 1% course correction, but like a 99% course correction. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah. All right. I hate that we talked about this, but I feel like if we don't talk about it, we're also erring. So
Last quick note from your favorite editor, Clark and Laura did not get to the Lenten section they had planned. Next podcast, it will not be Lent anymore, so they plan to probably revise it and turn it into another topic. So just a heads up on that.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Simpleton Podcast. I'm sorry that we had to talk about end-of-the-world issues and transgender issues. The only positive thing we got to cover is Afroman's doing a great job. And I got my arm fixed. Thank you, Afroman. All right. Talk to you later.
Bye, Clark.